So we get a lot of questions about what your guys' relationship is to decoding dyslexia. Are you board members? Probably not, because you don't get to spend 3 hours on the phone with me once a month. And so what we've discussed is, what is your relationship? Where do you guys fall into that? When you're speaking with a legislator, who are you? We've worked really hard to build up those relationships with our legislators, and they've kind of come to know the 7 or 8 of us that are at their doorstep. And so since decoding dyslexia has become a 501c3, we're bound by a lot of rules and regulations on what we can do, what we can say, what we can recommend. Like, a lot of times you guys will ask, what school district should I send my kids to? The answer is, I cannot tell you. But we can give you advice on what to look for. We can't recommend a tutor because that would violate our nonprofit status. But we can tell you what to look for. With that in mind, and to make your lives easier, and so that you're not bound by the same governing rules that we are, we've chosen to call all of you guys, where did it go? We had a name. So we're members. Me, Rachel, the 6 board members are considered members.
Oh, we have some suggested.
But for you guys, we've decided that the best thing to do would be like, I donate to Decoding Dyslexia, or I share similar goals as Decoding Dyslexia. Because once you become a member or part of, you have to follow all of our rules and guidelines, which means if you're a tutor and you want to be part of Decoding Dyslexia, you can never recommend yourself. Congrats, you just lost business. We see what you guys are doing as completely invaluable to our mission, because you guys can go out and say things that we can't say, but part of that also means that you can't say it as us. You guys going to the Capitol and talking with your legislator, or finding your legislator, in town and saying, hey, my kid's struggling, I've gone to the school, I need your help, or I need you to jump on this bill, I haven't seen your name on it yet. Those things are invaluable. If you go up to them and say, I'm a member of Decoding Dyslexia Minnesota and I want you to support our bill, that's not the same as, hey, I'm your constituent and I might even vote for you if you're really lucky. Please support this bill. And so we just wanted to clear that up. We know we have like the district leaders and all of that. And although you're not part of our governing board and you're not part of the board of Decoding Dyslexia, and we don't actually have members, you're invaluable to us. And we want you to be part of the movement. But we just want to keep you legally safe from getting in trouble by saying something you shouldn't say. Any questions? Because I don't know the answers, but you're welcome to ask them. Sounds good. I did my job.
Can you manage a microphone?
Sure.
And,
They put a cord up like that.
so I had the honor of meeting this man, Troy, sitting next to me, earlier this fall, who has done some amazing things in his district. Excellent strategizer, excellent person, and I'm very excited to introduce him so that he can share his work with you and with us. This is Troy.
Hi, everybody. So I'm based out of the Lakeville School District. We are a very small parent advocacy group compared to some of the other groups that are out there. We've got maybe 20 members that are part of our group on the Facebook page. Most of our meetings only have about 5 to 6 people that come to most of them, but I think we've accomplished some really good things over in Lakeville. This is my crew real quick. I've got a 13-year-old girl, 10-year-old boy, and then we've got triplet 7-year-olds. Of those triplets, 2 of them have characteristics of dyslexia. It's been very interesting. We have a unique perspective because we've got kids that are the same age, from the same family, being able to see the differences in their learning style and how one can just read a book, pick up new language tools off of that, and the other ones have to be explicitly taught all the rules of language to be able to pick up the same thing. So puts us in a unique position having that. Going through the same school district, our 10-year-old, same teaching methodologies, usually the same teachers, is in the top 1% of readers in the nation. And so it just kind of shows you, you can have very similar processes, but very different outcomes that come out as part of that. So that's one of the things that we learned. We had a unique advantage in learning about the characteristics of dyslexia in that my sister-in-law is Dr. Amy Schulte. So we were hearing from a very young age, preschool, hey, I'm seeing some characteristics of dyslexia in your kids. And for a long time, I was kind of like, yeah, but that's your thing, is you see those characteristics. It took me a very long time to come around and to start seeing some of the same things she was, and to get to that point where I was ready to be taking extra steps to help my kids out and everything. When we were going through preschool, we were hearing over and over again from the teachers, we just need to give this a little bit more time. They're not quite caught up yet. Let's just wait on this. Okay, well, they're not there. Let's hold them back from kindergarten for a year. Let's give them another year of preschool and see if they pick it up. End of preschool the second year. We're still not seeing it, but I'm sure it's just a matter of time. And that's when it was like, okay, it's time to get going on this. It's time to do something. Based on Amy's recommendation, we found an excellent private tutor and started private tutoring the year before they went into kindergarten, and made a lot of progress catching up, but we were still not there going into kindergarten. Went in to talk to the teacher about it and get to know the teacher meeting, and a teacher of 15 years told us that she'd never had a student with dyslexia before, and that she was wondering if we had any tips or tricks for her to help with teaching those kids and everything. We started very early in the process trying to go through the special education, getting help through special education. We're told by the special education teachers that they can't do any screening for dyslexia in kindergarten. They can't qualify for services in kindergarten for dyslexia, and just a lot of wrong information. And started digging down into what was happening, what the rights of our kids are as part of that, and just kind of immersing ourselves in what the laws are, what the recommendations are from the state, and so on. Once we started going through that process, we actually did get the school, after we submitted a written request, to do an evaluation of both of our kids. And we knew, because we were doing all of these outside tutoring, it was going to be a hard uphill climb to get our kids qualified, because they were getting all these additional services already. So we were kind of left with this choice between, do we let our kids fail so that they get help from the school that wasn't Orton Gillingham necessarily anyway, and maybe it'll help, maybe it won't, or do we keep doing what we need to do? And we decided that we weren't going to let our kids fail, and we'd try and go through the process the best we could. When we got to our final meeting for the evaluations, we had a district representative who was one of the administrators for our district that was there in that meeting. And I tried to make an emotional connection with the people who were in that meeting and explain how, this was a financial drain on our family to be doing all of this private tutoring. Very well worth it, Marilyn, thank you. But it is. It's something that you have to be paying for. And then we were trying to do it the best we could for our budget, so we did a very minimal amount of tutoring with a lot of individual practice on our own. We were doing 45 minutes with each kid before and after school every day. Our tutor was supporting us and helping us, what material we should be covering, and then we were reinforcing that throughout the week. And it's just a huge strain on the family, and I'm trying to explain this to the district administrator, why it is that we're in there, even though our kids are not necessarily failing in school yet, why we're asking for this help. And the response that we got back from the district administrator was that was our choice. Some parents choose to send their kids to soccer. Some choose to do piano lessons. The choice that we were doing was to do all of this outside tutoring. And that was it. That was when I became an advocate. So, I knew that we had to go up and above that, because this wasn't just a special education teacher at that school. It wasn't just a principal. This was someone that was all the way up at the district level. And that was where we needed to go to next to be able to do it. So that's kind of how I got into advocacy. A little bit about so we have only met with our district a handful of times, but I think that we developed a partnership with them because of the approach that we took very early on, where we came into the meeting, and before we had even started talking, they opened up and said, we want to work with you. We want to partner with you. We don't want to have an adversarial relationship. We agree with everything that we've heard you say before we got to this meeting. And we want to do better as a district and work with you on that. Some of the things that we've accomplished as part of that is that, as part of our screening, they now take some qualitative measures into consideration in addition to the quantitative. So they go beyond just test scores, and they start asking questions about, what is your family history? What outside tutoring have you had? Doing observations with, from the teachers and so on, and incorporating some of those things. They have started to have professional development as a result of it at multiple levels throughout the district. So they've got a training plan that they implemented this year that starts with the pre-K teachers. They've got another track that is for their special education teachers, for all of their regular teachers, for the reading specialists that they have, and for the principals. So at each level, they've got a track of this is what we're doing, in September, this is October, November, and so on throughout the year. So we're very pleased with all the professional development that they've implemented.
Dyslexia specialist?
Yeah, yep, and that program was put together by the dyslexia specialist. Reallocating one of their staff members as a dyslexia specialist was another thing that was a big improvement. There's probably some more things that I'm forgetting, but overall, it doesn't fix all of the things that happen that need to be fixed at our district. And for our kids who are, getting close to reading at grade level, it hasn't made a difference in their outcome yet. They're not on a different plan because of these things, but I know that we're making differences for other kids, and that's kind of what I'm focused on right now. Is I do one thing for my kids, the tutoring privately, and then I've got my advocacy hat that I put on, which is the things I'm trying to do for the other kids in the district that don't have a sister-in-law that's the special education, that's dyslexia specialist for the state, and don't have the finances to be hiring that tutor and so on. So for the talk today, I need your help. I'm recovering from pneumonia for the last 2 months, and I can't talk the entire time that we're here. And I know that you guys have a lot to share about your experiences in advocacy in your districts that is different than ours. The experience of Minnetonka with a large parents group that they have is very different than our small group that we have in Lakeville. So I'd like to open those things up a little bit. I wanted to ask real quick if we could just have a raise of hands on if you are the only person that you know of in your district right now that is involved in advocacy. Do we have anyone who's a single person? And how many of you have under 5 people that are involved in the advocacy in your district right now? And how many of you have under 20? So what I'm seeing is that we've got a lot of people who are new, who are small, and who are starting out. We've got some people who are from those larger groups, and I'm hoping that I can give some ideas for you to bring back to your groups, to some concrete things that you can be doing different. I wanted to hit real quick too, if I have, yes?
I'm just really curious, so naming our districts really helped, but I'm wondering if other people haven't found their people. I mean, they're here, so maybe we could do like a metro, everybody stand up and sort of list down our districts.
Sure, do you want to go for it?
I think that's a great idea, and the point about this is connecting people. If you are in the Northeast Metro, why don't you go ahead and stand or raise your hand? Northeast Metro. How about people seeing each other? You want to do a roll call? We can do that, but we're going to do it quickly. Okay.
District 1 and 6. District 271, Bloomington.
Minneapolis.
Whiteberry. Edina, St. Park.
Hopkins.
Minnetonka.
Orono.
Did we get yours?
We're both Orono.
Oh, okay.
Edina. Moundsview.
Edina.
Lakeview. Moundsview.
Moundsview. St. Louis Park. St. Louis Park. Savage Park Lake.
Savage Fire Lake. Wayzata.
Stillwater. Moundsview. White Bear.
White Bear.
Mattavita.
North St. Paul.
Shakopee. St. Cloud.
Bill Murray.
Maplewood.
South Washington County.
Forest Lake. White Bear.
Will River.
Cromwell.
Oh, maybe Delano.
Grand Rapids.
Anoka Hennepin.
Anoka Hennepin.
Anoka Hennepin.
Minneapolis. Stillwater.
Rolesville.
Rockford.
White Bear.
White Bear Lake.
Anoka Hennepin.
Okay.
Excellent.
Part of what
I wanted to open real quick too with the one point that I feel is most important from the conversation to make sure that I get across to everybody. If I could real quick, could you raise your hand please if you consider yourself a professional in the education field? And could you keep your hand up if you got into that field because of the money? And could you put your hand up if you got into it because you want to help kids? So I want everyone to keep that in mind as we're talking about the strategy today, is that all the people that you're working with, when you feel like you're in this adversarial relationship, got into teaching because they want to be helping kids. And it's really difficult sometimes when you feel like you're advocating for a child and you feel like you're hitting roadblocks to keep that in mind. That's something that I've had to work real hard on also, is that, this problem can't be solved by legislation alone. The legislation alone gives us really good tools that we're able to use to make changes, but at the end of the day, it's the people who are working, one-on-one and at the district level with the kids that are going to make the changes. And if you're not able to make a connection and make a partnership with those people to get changes going in your district, it doesn't matter what laws we pass, because you can follow the letter of the law as much as you want and still have very little impact on dyslexic kids. It's our job to take all of the good things that Decoding Dyslexia has done at the legislative levels and then use that as tools to make connections at the individual districts and try to make the change actually happen there. So we'll hit on a lot of different strategies for engaging in advocacy throughout this, but that's the big thing, is that you may need to rethink how it is that even if you've hit roadblocks up until now, it's time to rethink how you're going to engage with those people, how you're going to start conversations and dialogues again, and maybe reach out to other people, reach out to special education teachers if you're having a hard time with the admin. Go up to the board level if you're having difficulty with the people you've been communicating. So try and find where you can make those connections and where you can get someone on your side, even if it's on the small things, and then start building on that as you go forward. So. I'm going to start off talking a little bit about building a foundation, especially I think this is helpful for those of you who are individuals that want to be growing the size of your group. You can make some change just by meeting one-on-one with your administrators, but it's always going to be better to have a large group of people to be showing up at those meetings to show that this is an issue of interest not just to you but to the district as a whole. We found it helpful at the beginning of our group to go out and set a mission. And we found 3 things were part of our mission that was very important, and it was important not to overemphasize any one of these over the others in order to build that group size up, because different parents are going to want different things. You might be really charged up about advocacy within your district, but there might be some other mom who just wants help for her kids and wants to be able to connect with somebody and get information about how to help their kids out. And by concentrating on all the different needs that these parents bring to the groups, it's going to help you improve the size of the group also. I wanted to mention too, I see some people writing furiously. If that's how you learn best, that's great. But this whole PowerPoint we should be able to make available as a digital file up on the site. So if it feels like I'm going too fast and whatever, you don't have to write things, but feel free to if that helps you retain it.
In addition, much of the materials that were given in the handout packet, there should be like 1 or 2 per table. If you go into the file section of the closed Facebook page, you have access to all of those, in addition to school board speeches, lots of other information that is easy to use. There is also a copy of the dyslexia specialist education schedule for her district that she set up in Lakeville earlier this year that we had permission to share.
So the 3 goals that we have, the first one is advocacy, so making changes through the district. The second one is sharing information amongst our members. We've got lots of great information about what going through the IEP process is like that new parents don't know, the importance of outside tutoring and who those resources are for tutoring, so that you're getting certified instructors and not just whatever business it is that's set up to help with reading support. And then there's also an aspect of emotional support. There's a lot of parents who come to our meetings who have no one else that knows what it's like to go through this process, and they're just like wounded. And being able to talk with other people to understand what it is that they're going through and everything is another important part of it too. We thought it was important to consider the membership requirements that we had both for the Facebook group and as members of our group. And sometimes this has been an unpopular decision. You'll have to decide as a group whether it's important or not. But there are some parents who want that as a place that they can go share information without feeling like it's going to go back and hurt relationships they have either with teachers or with special educators and things like that. And you'll want to consider whether you want to open membership up to people who are staff members of the district. We've had requests from outside groups that are interested in dyslexia and dyslexia advocacy but don't have kids in our district that have requested to join our group before too. That was another thing that we decided, is that you need to be someone who has a child in the district, and it's not just a place for us to collect lots of members from outside places. These choices are going to be, the right choice is going to be different for each group, but I think it's something helpful to at least have a discussion with as you're setting your group up. Recruitment is something that we get asked a lot about. One of the things that we started doing when I wanted to get involved in dyslexia is I reached out to the parent district, what's the Facebook group? The full name? District leaders? Yes. And was told that there's already a Lakeville dyslexia group. Great. I was pointed over to there. I asked for membership. And when I first got out to the group, it was largely a group that just shared links on Facebook back and forth, right? But that gave me a building place to say, hey, have you guys thought about meeting in person and starting to see if we can get some change going with the district? And right off the bat, I had 10, 15 people that we were able to have a full group instead of just me trying to talk with the administrators at the district. Business cards are really cheap to buy these days. For $15, you can get a few hundred business cards, and you can distribute those out to members of your group and have people just write their information on the back, throw one in a purse or wallet, and then when you're talking with parents about the advocacy that you're involved in, just passing those business cards out. There are PTO and parent Facebook groups that are out there that we found very helpful. Some of them don't want people advertising for other things, but you can always give that a try and see if you can build your membership up that way. There's already a lot of special education parent groups that are meeting out there, and even if you're not bringing new dyslexia people in, they've had experience a lot of times with advocacy already and can tell you who the main contacts are that you want to begin with. So having one or two of your members going over to those general special education groups can be very helpful. And the number one way that we build is one-on-one networking. I try to talk about the advocacy work that I do with as many parents as possible. And I can't tell you how many times I can hear, oh, my kid doesn't have dyslexia, but they really have a lot of difficulty reading. And I've just really found that dyslexia is a powerful word in that it can help connect people up with resources online for what their kids are going with, but also has a lot of meaning for people, and they might not be ready for that label yet. And you have to be ready to go, turn that around and say, well, even if they're struggling, there's a lot of great information that we could give you about good reading help. And that's a way to draw people in that might be, turned off by having their kid labeled as dyslexic. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the mistakes that I had off the bat with running meetings. In the first meeting that we got together for, I didn't have much of an agenda. I just wanted to get people together. I was very excited that we were all going to meet and just kind of open it up to see what people wanted to do with the group. And it basically turned into a big therapy session. So, everyone was very wounded about the experiences they had had trying to get help for their kids and that they couldn't get anything done. And it was very therapeutic, and I think it was a great way to build those relationships, but we didn't really get any plan in place. We didn't get anything accomplished out of it other than feeling better. And that kind of goes back to those 3 goals that we have for our group. The best way that I found to kind of help with that is to use an agenda ahead of time. Assign length of time for each agenda item, so we're going to have a certain amount of time for sharing, individual things, a certain amount of time to talk about, what resources we have found useful, and then some time to talk about what we're going to do for advocacy next. I also found it was very helpful to come with ideas in advance instead of just leaving it wide open to whatever anyone thinks. Sometimes you really do have to have a leadership role in these groups and come in there with some concrete ideas about what you want to get accomplished while leaving it open enough that everyone feels involved. So you want to get feedback because then they feel invested in what you're doing, but you can't just leave it open to wherever the meeting might take you. You have to have some concrete ideas in advance to bring into these meetings. The second meeting, we avoided the problems of the first meeting, but we had some new members that came in as part of that meeting. Some of them were trained in dyslexia and had, a lot of deep experience in it. And so the problem that we had with our second meeting is that some of those people tended to monopolize all the time that we had with it and be lecturing. And this was the second meeting that we had out of it. So now we're learning things a little bit at a time, getting more prepared for each of our next meetings. The best thing that I found for this, and this might not be an issue you've got with every group, you might have, fine sharing of time. We started saying individual time limits. Let's try and keep it to under 5 minutes so everyone has an opportunity, to share and everything. Another thing that's important in building your group up is being able to assist new parents in their individual IEP advocacy. All of the stuff that you want to do at a district level flows from the things that you're doing with individual kids. So it's not until you're documenting what the process is like at the district that you're able to come back with concrete information to district leaders to say, this is what's going wrong, this is where the problems are in our district. And to be able to do that, you need to help these new parents who've never had a kid with an IEP before and have never gone through the process of being evaluated with how to go through that process. To do that, it's very helpful to gather information about what their rights are as a parent. Whenever they go to these meetings, they're going to get a sheet that's mandated from the state of Minnesota about what their rights are. I don't find that sheet terribly helpful. It's got lots and lots of words in there, but at the end of the day, it's very vague on a lot of what their rights are and everything. There's a lot better information that's out there about what their rights are, and if you start gathering that stuff ahead of time, it's going to make it easier for these parents to be able to go through that process feeling educated. If you can, it's helpful to designate members within your group that are going to be assisting these new parents that want to pursue IEP, and it might not even be IEP. It might just be trying to get help through the core education, through 401 plans, and I'm saying that generally. But having someone who understands what these rights are and possibly would be willing to go to some of these meetings with parents as an advocate for them, someone who's on their side of the table. It's very intimidating when you're sitting on one side of the table and you've got a psychologist and you've got speech pathologists and all these people with all these degrees, that you're the only one that feels like you're there for the kid. It can really feel good to have someone sitting next to you that's, if nothing else, helping to listen and write things down and help you with ideas after the fact. We're very lucky in Lakeville District in that Lakeville actually has some employed special educators that act as parent advocates that you can request go to these meetings and help you with understanding what the process is. If your district doesn't have something like that, it's something you can ask for. And if you don't have that within your district, even if you don't feel qualified for it, consider whether that's something that you would be willing to do just to be that support for that person and to help them out in whatever ways that you could. Some other options for getting that kind of help. The Pacer Center has people who will help out with individual advocacy also. They can give you ideas about what your rights are, and there are certain situations in which they will actually send someone out to go to these meetings with you also. I found it was helpful when I made a call over there. They put me in touch with someone, called me back, talked through what we had been through, gave suggestions. So make sure that your parents are aware of the services of the Pacer Center. The other one is the Minnesota Disability Law Center. They have lawyers who have will in some cases they have all levels of different support. So depending on, you submit your case information and then they evaluate that and they have to triage. They can't have 40 hours of lawyer services for free for every kid, obviously, but they've got all different levels that might be just a quick phone consultation all the way up into getting legal representation of some kind that's available. It's important to also make sure that you're avoiding burnout and building groups that survive transition. All of our kids are getting older, and there will be some day where we need to leave the advocacy group that we're in. And you're not doing your group any favors if you take everything on your shoulders and don't leave a good transition plan and have other leaders who are willing to take things up as you move on. I think it's helpful to come with lists of tasks that need bodies. Consider having cards for new members to fill out that talk about how much time commitment they're willing to put into the group and what skills that they bring. That might be anything from public speaking to organizational skills, legal expertise, and so on. And try and identify multiple key leaders whenever you can. Poor retention can be an issue too. We've got a lot of parents who have come to one meeting and then we have a hard time getting them back over again. I think the best way to handle that is to be putting out some questionnaires occasionally. You know, are we meeting your needs? Is there any feedback you want to give our group anonymously? And make sure that you're asking your members what it is that they need and what changes that you can be doing. Making sure that they're interested or represented, that goes back to those 3 goals of the group. We want to make sure that if you're only interested in advocacy, that there might be some other things that those other members find helpful. And the biggest thing that is really hard is to be redirecting conversation to keep the experience positive. It can feel very good to get everything out and to complain about all the problems you've had and everything, but in the long term, hopelessness isn't inspiring. If it feels like no matter what you're going to do that nothing is going to change, and that's not the kind of thing that keeps people coming back. It's once you're able to turn that into a positive message, talk about the successes that you've had, and just as importantly, what the goals are and what you're hoping to accomplish in the future, that's what gets people invested in coming back into your group over the long term. So once you've built your group up, the next thing you need to start doing is preparing and gathering resources prior to engaging with your district. The more that you go in there prepared, the better off and more confident you're going to feel, and the more you're going to get the respect of the district administrators and the staff that you're working with. And there's a lot of concrete things that you can be doing in advance of those meetings with district leaders to try and be as prepared as possible for that. I'm going to have to apologize. I really don't have a preference for Wilson and Barton. They're just the only 2 numbers I could find locally. And we'll make sure to add to this before we get it up. But compiling a list of local certified tutors for your district can be very helpful for parents. Sometimes it can feel so overwhelming that they come to us for help and we say, I think you need a certified teacher, but they just give up and say, I don't know where to find one, and that's as far as it goes for their kid. By having this list already published out on your Facebook page for them to go out and say, well, here's 4 in Lakeville, here's 2 in Apple Valley, here we've got some in Burnsville, that can be, making it easy for them can make that extra step of going out and making some phone calls doable for them. Finding out about local literacy plans. I've always kind of referred to this as icebreaker advocacy. Having a local literacy plan published out on a school district website is not going to help a kid with dyslexia read. But they're required by law to do it. And so it's something, which is something that the districts care about. So by going out and saying, hey, you don't have a local literacy plan on the site, now you're starting to set up a pattern of I have, requested that you do something, and then they take action as a result of that. So it's not something that's going to change the world, but it's starting off that pattern of you making requests and having them respond to those requests after the fact. Throughout my proposal here, the presentation, some of these links get extremely long for going out to websites. So I use tinyURL just to make it a little bit shorter. You can write those down easily, or you'll be able to access them once we publish these files out there. But if anything looks like it comes from a weird address, that's why I've got the tiny URLs up there, because some of them are 4 lines long to get to some of this information. So there is a law in the state of Minnesota that schools are required to have a local literacy plan, and they're required to publish it out on their website. In Lakeville, when we first went out looking for this, we found a local literacy plan for the prior school year. And that was one of the first requests that I made out to district administrators was, why don't we have a current local literacy plan out on the website. And they came back and said, well, our local literacy plan is a living document that we update throughout the year. And I said, but we should have a plan as something that is forward-looking. No, we have one that we're constantly updating throughout the year. Okay, could I have access to that? Oh, we don't release the current year's plan. And so I just wrote back after that, I want to make sure clear, you have a plan for the current school year, but parents aren't allowed to see it. It's a secret document the parents aren't allowed to see. 2 weeks later, there was a current local literacy plan that was published out on the school website. Yes?
I just have a really quick question. So when you're talking about having these conversations with parents, who do you usually with? Like superintendent, principals?
So there's the name is escaping me. There's a director of learning, I believe.
Director of Teaching and Learning.
Director of Teaching and Learning that we've worked with. We have also worked with the vice superintendent and the head of the special education department we've had conversations with. So it's going to be different people, and they can direct you to the right one, once you find someone to work with. But just go out to the district website and start looking up some phone numbers, maybe hit a few people at first and say, feel free to let me know who's the right person to direct these requests to. So there's also state requirements about what must be in that local literacy plan. And you're able to go out and take a look at what those requirements are. And then we have recommendations for what those local literacy plans are specific to dyslexia and what should be how they should be revising those local literacy plans. So even if they have one that's published out there, there's a lot of things you can go back to and say you're not in compliance, you're not following the recommendations that's given from the state of Minnesota, and all of those things can be ways to start that dialogue with someone where you make a request and then they take some action based on that. Collecting parent observations that are out of compliance with state and federal law is another way to get some movement and to be taken seriously by the districts because they care about complying with laws. This is, again, where helping those parents out with what the process for going through requesting help from the school is very good for. Have them go ahead and collect emails, correspondence, write down communications that they have with people. That way, you're able to have that information documented. One of the things you'll notice about any IEP meeting that you go to with the school is that they have someone who's there responsible for documenting everything out. And there's a reason that they do that, have everything documented. You should be taking that as a good practice to have also. Have parents be doing the same thing. And then have parents even sign off and sign and date the information they give you and ask if you can put that into your permanent record as an advocacy group so that you can refer back to it later instead of trying to talk about, well, I had a conversation with Sue 2 years ago and this is the way that your district was handling this issue at that time. Try to get paper documented instances where the school's out of compliance either with regulations or with recommendations. These were a lot of the things that we documented through the Lakeville School District. There's a document that's on a lot of your tables that's the Goals of Advocacy, and throughout that document we were putting down this is what teachers and staff are telling us about dyslexia. Because a lot of times the district administrators, they would look at that and they say, that's not right, that's wrong that happened, that's something that needs to get fixed, and that might be, that might be what pushes them over to see that there are some changes that have to happen within the district. They're assuming that everything, until they hear otherwise, they're assuming that their staff is handling these situations correctly and is giving the right information to parents. It's your responsibility to go through and document if that is not the case, because that's how change happens. There are two documents that I feel are the most helpful in both individual advocacy and in making change at the district level, and I've got the links to both of those at the bottom.
Can you read the Y?
Read which one?
So after com, it says /Y.
Oh, so I've got, and again, this will be published up on the site, but Y9Q VIOWK. Is it a J? Okay. I can't see with the underline real well. So this document here was authored by Vicky Weinberg, who Amy mentioned earlier. This is what all the districts use to qualify whether your kid gets an IEP or not. There's a lot of misinformation about what it is that can be qualifying criteria, from people saying that until they go through a set of scientific research-based investigation to determine, if they're to determine whether or not they're qualified, that you can't make a request. As a parent, you or anyone that's interested in that child's well-being can make a request at any point to have them evaluated. Doesn't mean the school has to grant that, but they have to at least consider it if someone comes through and asks that their child be evaluated. There's lots of different ways that kids can qualify, all the way up to an override of the rules that's available if there are outside circumstances like private tutoring and things like that. So anytime that it seems like there's a hard cutoff that your kid didn't meet this score by 1 point or something like that, you want to go back, and it's a very technical document and it can be hard to understand, but this is the document that you want to go take a look at to find out if there's other ways that your child could qualify and whether the people are giving you the correct information about how those qualifications work. The second document is the Minnesota Disability Law Center's Advocacy Fact Sheet. Both of these documents are also published out on the Minnesota website. So this isn't, just some private site. It's out on the Minnesota site. This is the document that I wish that they gave all parents for their rights of their child when they go to these meetings, because it's in plain English and it doesn't talk about just the minimum of what your rights are. It talks about a lot of things that aren't in that other document. I'd highly recommend anybody go take a look at both of those if you're unclear, and give it to new parents to be clear about what it is that your child has for rights. Our group found it very important to create a position paper. We create two documents. One is our Goals of Advocacy, the other is the position paper. I think that a lot of what happens when it seems like you're in conflict with a staff person comes down to miscommunication and misunderstandings. When I was first coming out to talk with the principal and the special education people about what I was looking for, I was hearing a lot of, we already do phonics in our program. We're already doing everything that you're asking for. And so by putting together a position paper, and these are out on the tables and on the website also, it helps clarify how you see the issue of dyslexia and what you're looking at a general level from the district. It talks about how dyslexia interventions are different than just quality teaching. My 1% reader, quality teaching was enough for him. My dyslexic learners, it wasn't. They needed to be taught in a different way than he did. We also have a Goals of Advocacy paper. The format that we went for starts with a parent perspective. So this is our opportunity to go and tell the district administrators, this is what we're observing when we go talk to people about things. This is what my kid is going through. That's one of the main things that you can bring to this conversation is that individual, this is what I see at the ground level, regardless of what your intent is up at the district level, this is the way it's being implemented, for individual kids within the district. Then we went through opportunities for improvement. This was very specific requests about what we'd like to see change to help our parent perspectives. So it might be something like, your teachers are giving bad information about dyslexia. We would like a fact sheet that is distributed to all the teachers throughout the district that when they get asked a question, sure, they should have those one-on-one conversations with the parent, but they should also be giving them a sheet of paper that is the official position of the district on this issue to make sure the teacher didn't misstate something or misinterpret it. We don't have that yet in Lakeville, but it's one of the things that we'd like to have is a paper that qualifies those things. And then questions back to the district. It might be that you're misunderstanding what the district is trying to do too. Ask them questions. What is their success rate with helping kids after they put them on programs. Are they tracking that information? Ask them to, to reinforce and to back up their assertions that they're doing a good job with dyslexic kids, and see if you can get them to answer some of these. Maybe you don't get answers to all of them, but if you go to a school board member and say, listen, we asked 10 questions of the school district to help us understand how the school is doing with dyslexia better, and they didn't give us a response on a single one. That's the kind of thing that school board members, pay attention to. So if they give you no response after a very specific list of requests and questions, and you've documented that, that's the kind of thing that can get some progress made. I wanted to open this up real quick to ask if there's any other groups here that have some written documents that they've done, and what the response has been and what's been helpful. Yeah.
District 106 created Egan, Rosemont, Egan, Apple Valley. We created kind of like a mission statement and, asked for, the intervention for dyslexia to be recognized and changed and focusing on phonemic awareness. And we started a dyslexia task force group last year. There were several meetings, once a month, and it seemed like they took our information that we requested and kind of used that to their advantage to say, oh yeah, this is what we're doing. This is how our program provides phonemic awareness. This is how our program is multisensory, yes. And we recognize neurodiversity and good job for us, like we're doing this. And that was that. So right now I'd like to get together again and start asking, well, I've already asked a lot of these questions, like, what is the program that you're using for dyslexic children? And they can't really name it. So it's kind of like an eclectic approach, which isn't appropriate. So I just feel like last year was a total failure.
So you said that you had some problems where the school district took that document around and made it look like they were complying. Did you learn anything off that to share with the group about what you would do differently going forward?
Honestly, I don't know what else to do. That's what I did. That was my first step. They took it to their advantage and whatever. And then right now, I've just submitted documents or emailed to the district special education director and the superintendent and just asked them questions like, can you please tell me, asking them how, I guess have they looked at the guidelines put out by ND and referred to the document put out, I think it's what to do with dyslexia. That ND document's really well, it's like a 50-page document on the website.
Is that the Making Local Literacy Plans comply with the dyslexia law?
Literacy plans, yes, for students with dyslexia.
That's a Vicky Weinberg document also.
Okay, yeah, so I asked them, questions like, does this program, first of all, they can't really stick to a literacy plan that they're using. They say it's LLI, then their literacy plan changed. They put a little horrible document on the website just saying how they've addressed dyslexia since those task force meetings, and it's not true what they put on there. So, you just can't give up. I don't know what else to say.
That's true. You got to tap into that. They got into it to help kids, and you might have to go up the level to talk with the the school board. You might try and connect with individual teachers. I've had teachers reach out to me within the district saying, we want to do more, let's talk it and everything.
Dyslexia task force groups, I didn't say, but we went to school board meeting and like a group of 5 parents, and we just read our personal story, and then they reached out to us to talk, and then we had those meetings, and that's what happened.
So you had meetings after the school board meeting?
That's how we got their attention.
Yep.
The school board meeting, we developed the Dyslexia task force group where we had our mission statement. They took that and then just continued to take that and say, this is how we're doing exactly what you said you need. And then come to observing what they do. It's not multi-sensory, it's not structured literacy. So on paper it might look right, but it's not.
So I just wanted to point out real quick, the document she's talking about, which is very good, is this checking against the recommendations. This is revising local literacy plans to comply with state dyslexia requirements. And it's an excellent document that has very specific dyslexia things. One of the small accomplishments that we got in Lakeville was to have the word dyslexia added to our local literacy plan for the very first time. So it's not just about literacy in general. The word dyslexia is in there and what their interventions are. Again, it's another one of those icebreaker things where, we requested something, they responded, let's take that and try and build on it going forward and everything, and keep those dialogues going. So does anyone else have anything that they'd like to share about creating the documents and so on and submitting to the district that they found they learned something good about? Okay. Next up is making your connections within the district. So there were some questions earlier about who to be reaching out to. The superintendent, the head of learning, and the special education people are some of the first people that you want to be talking with. And then also, going down and talking in individual schools. You've got lots of parents there. Talk to the special education people and the literacy specialists, if you have them within the school, and ask them, would they be willing to come to one of your meetings and talk? Would they be willing to engage with your group to learn more about it? So you can work with individual people throughout the district along with the administrators and board members and try and find who those people are. Another thing that we wanted to mention was Advocacy Mentors. If you're really struggling and having a hard time deciding how to proceed within your district, reach out to Decoding Dyslexia or on the Parent Leaders Facebook group and ask for some help, and we will have people who can at least walk the journey with you a little bit and give you some recommendations based on their experience. We'd like to put you in touch with some people to help you out if you're finding that you're running out of ideas and need some recommendations.
And I'd like to kind of make a comment about that. The purpose of the site is not to educate each other on what dyslexia is, and that's not what's going on. That's probably what you're doing in your local sites. The stuff that's on there, if you really scroll through, is supposed to be resources for you, resources to, give these new families that are coming, resources that you can look at. Again, if you go to that file section on the upper left-hand page, you can access people's school board speeches, the things that we've handed out today, the other items that Troy is there. And what I'm kind of finding as one of the administrators of that site is people will reach out to me personally, but they're not always very comfortable like doing in a group setting. And I just want to remind, this is us, so it's supposed to be kind of a safe place to do that. I probably have the same issue that you guys do, where I'm not getting as much visibility on the site that I would like to, so that's sometimes confusing. Is this meeting people's needs? Is this worth my while? I've heard a lot of people talk about this. In fact, on the survey results that we received regarding this conference, and we didn't get a very good survey result rate. We only had 17 respond, but it was very loud and clear that the main way that people communicate with the people in their district is by social media. So I looked up the Facebook algorithm, and a like might get you a little bit more visualization. If it's emoji, it's even more. If somebody shares or comments, and if somebody shares or comments on top of a share or comment, so this whole kind of pyramid thing. So, if you've really got people on there and you're not having many people look at it, ask your buddies around you to, maybe do some of those things and see if you can reach a few more people.
So you've got a group, You've built the group up, you've got enough people that you feel comfortable doing it, keeping in mind some groups are being very effective with only 4 or 5 people. Don't let your group being too small prevent you from going out and actually making, your first attempt at advocacy. You went out and gathered some resources, you've got some documents, you've got examples of things that need to change inside the district, and you're ready to go sit down with some of those district administrators for the first time. One of the first things is, I think, setting reasonable expectations with your members that meaningful change is a slow process and it might take years. I've had very good success with Lakeville, but for my kids, it has not made a difference in the way that they're being educated yet, right? And that's just something that I've kind of come to terms with, is that I'm doing this hat for other people's kids, and I do this hat for my own kids of getting them the tutoring and the individual help that they need at home. I think it's important to set expectations with your members so that you're retaining them, that relying on advocacy alone to help their kids with immediate needs is going to lead to disappointment. I really strongly believe in the value of a tutor for kids that are really struggling and need it, and that's what I push my parents towards, is I want to help you get help through the district, but even if we go through all the process and they qualify for an IEP and all of these things, it might not be that the instruction that they get is going to be enough to make up that gap. And you should take this as seriously as you can, as early as possible, and then you can always back off a little bit later as you get to later years, but dyslexia is something that is best dealt with early and often. Yes?
Do you or anyone else here have suggestions for handling that cost? Because I'd say I'm upper middle class income. My life is good, but I have so much of my own medical debt that the idea of getting a tutor for my daughter, I'll do whatever I need to do for her, but it is extremely overwhelming, and I'm in a good financial position. Like, I don't even know what to do anymore. Like, I just feel overwhelmed by the financial part.
Anyone else have anything to say about that?
I agree. Feel the exact same way.
I was going to suggest, and I don't know how many people have had good luck with it, because we get this question a lot, and it is so crazy, and our tutors in the area are so saturated because, well, we've had success in different places in Minnetonka. Now, they have supply demand, there's so many kids, 40%, you're booted out, a program. There's a lot of things going on still. So we then are like, okay, go outside of it, but then a lot of people between either extracurriculars or costs are like, how do I make this work? I have many people used online, because I know there's some Skyping online services that there's a few families have had good success with, where it's tutors through Skype, and I think it's a little more affordable. I don't know if people have.
I was just gonna say, you can get trained online through the reading center.
Right, you can yourself, sure. Yeah. As a dyslexic myself, I was like, yeah, no, that's never happening. Yeah, but multiple kids, and we're in the same boat. Like, our kids, all the stuff we've done, none of us have had anything for our children at all, so it's 2 different hats. My kids don't qualify, so.
Yes?
Can I just throw a couple things out for that? I've heard that it's tax deductible, so make sure that if you have a prescription, that you have the ability to write that off and buy a prescription. It needs to be suggested during your psychology report that you've got, that your student participates in the Gillingham training. It would then be tax deductible. Some people are paying me out of their HSA accounts. I have no idea why. But I'm like,
You have to have a diagnosis,
Yeah,
and you have to
I have
connect
to
with your specific
qualify.
insurance company. I've checked with 3. I did have to ask for management for all 3, and all 3 looked into it and said, yes, you can pay for it out of your HSA with a diagnosis.
and then the person that's doing it has to meet certain qualifications. Is that true for that? Or is that just on taxes?
I'd have to double check. Oh, I'm going to point out, Lynn, can I get you to say that? Hold on. I want this to be out of here.
Okay, I did this, when my son was diagnosed, it was suggested to me that I could pay out of my HSA through it. And all I did is I went to my pediatrician and I said, hey, I got this diagnosis for, I don't know, dyslexia or something, and I guess I need a prescription for Orton Gillingham. And he said, oh, okay. He wrote it. I called my insurance agency or my HSA, and I just said, hey, I've got this, whatever, I don't know, I got what I was supposed to do. And they said, sure, fax it in. And I took everything out of my HSA for tutoring for my son. So it's, I mean, you're still paying, but you're getting it tax on pre-tax dollars. And it made it better because, you know, it came out of my paycheck. I never really saw the money. Those kind of things. But it was a way, and I will, you know, we did actually, and I don't know that this will be on the table ever again, but we have actually passed it. We did a few years ago have a tax deduction too, specifically for that. So.
I see the other hands, but I'm curious to hear what our tutor has to say on the issue. Miss Marilyn?
You have to be sure, though, whoever you hire, and you're using taxing that is certified for that field.
Yes.
Tax ID, say that one more time.
It has to be a person that's certified for that disability, not just a teacher
Right.
that's
Right.
got a license. I mean, that sounds great, but it doesn't work. So you have to make sure. I do have some people that do the savings type plan, and you know, I sign all the papers every month. And I think too, on the tutoring, I'll tell you what one of my parents said once, and it was her, not me, saying it. I know it's expensive. I try to do my best for my people. I try to do it in a shorter time. I think I've done it many years, so I can do a good job and give them some things to do and make it as affordable as possible. But this parent said, and she would have a 4th grade boy that had been in the 15th percentile since 1st grade. He was in special ed, and he certainly made some progress to stay in the 15th percentile, but he never cut the, when he started tutoring, and in 3 months he went to the 38th percentile. By summer he was in the 58th percentile, and he made progress. And she said, you pay now or pay later. That's right. And that's hard to hear. And I also, when I went through training, I said to one of the people that was doing training, I said, how do people afford this? I couldn't have done this, you know, when my kids. She said, I got a second job to pay the bill because it was so important. So I think it's, you know, we get caught in that economy, and if you're the person selling the program, you know, it's kind of like, oh, you're going to make all this money. My son-in-law said, they don't know how much time you spend doing this, talking to people, helping people.
You have time for one more?
Yeah, I saw one more in the back.
We do the HSA thing too, so I'll cover it. But I do know I was looking into getting certified and training myself, which I never did. But I did see that for a lot of those programs, they take kids, they need to train on kids, dyslexic kids. And so a lot of those programs will take kids, you can, you know, apply for it, and it still costs something, but it's not the typical $55, $60 an hour. But, I know there was one in St. Paul last year that I almost wanted to.
I think this is again why it's important to be locally connected for alternative options, and that could be a different conversation depending on where you're at. So I'm going to give it over to Troy.
I just had a couple of quick thoughts on this that weren't covered. One of the options that we were able to have with our tutor, and not all tutors are willing to do this, is we just went with 1 day a week of tutoring, and we focused during that 1 day a week on educating us on what that current week's lesson was, and then the actual time put in throughout the week was time that we had to do. And that has been a successful method for us when we put the time in onto it. When you don't put the time in, then it's not sufficient time.
And I'll just add, because I've done that with parents as well, because you really have to do that work, or else the tutor can't be efficient when they're meeting with your student and you, if that's not being reinforced or done.
You really got to commit to it, and it's a huge amount of work. So you pay with your time or you pay with your money when you're doing those things, if you're willing to find a tutor that's willing to do something like that with you. I think that's all I had for thoughts. So this was what the first meeting that I had with administrators felt like, was herding cats with my group of parents that we had there. One of the things that I want to impress on you ahead of time is that, you know, we had a parent come in that had never been with our group before, and the first meeting they ever went to was with our meeting with district administrators. And it was our first meeting with the district administrators. And one of the things that they said was that, one of the things people don't realize is that, all the kids who are dyslexic have ADHD also. And as soon as they say that, I'm just like, oh gosh, there goes our credibility right out the window. So having conversations with your parents ahead of time to make sure that you talk about tone, that you get buy-in from the other parents on goals, and that everyone is staying on message is really important for those first meetings. It's important to be, when you're working with these district administrators, both firm and friendly. So when we're talking about making that one-on-one connection, that doesn't mean you have to roll over on everything and just go along with what the district administrators say, but keeping in mind that they enter the profession to help kids, that they may have incorrect preconceived ideas about what you want. That's where having your position paper and goals of advocacy can prevent those miscommunications. And things like that phonics is all that you're asking for. I hit that again at every level, from the teacher to the special ed up to the district people. So there really could be some miscommunications and misunderstandings about what it is that you're asking for, and making sure that you're really clear in those goals of advocacy and not using broad terms. Don't get hung up on, well, we want structured literacy, well, we believe in balanced literacy. Talking about those two terms doesn't talk specifically about what you want to have happen in the classroom, and it's getting into arguments that aren't improving things for kids. So make sure that you have at least clarified where you have disagreement before you start arguing about things. Because if you don't understand what each of you wants that is different, there's no sense to be arguing about it. Get to clarity before you start working on advocacy and trying to change things. You need to keep in mind as you're doing this that district administrators are balancing competing interests. They have a limited amount of money. If you shift money over to dyslexic kids, that money is coming away from some other kid in some other program. And that's just something you have to keep in the back of your head as you're working with them. It's not practical for us to put, if we say that 10 to 20% of kids are dyslexic, the school cannot put 20% of kids on an IEP plan. And so it's important that you be having conversations with the district administrators and be acknowledging that you understand that there are budgetary constraints that they're working within, and that you are committed to trying to find the best way possible to meet the needs of kids within those constraints. I was really set on certain programs when I first started meeting with my district administrators, and when they talked with me, they talked about how they have a long history in the district of working on the Sunday system. And I needed to be open to the fact that they've already invested in training materials in Sunday, that they've already got a lot of work in this area, and for our district, the program that I was thinking about might not be the best one, and you need to be flexible and willing to work within the budgetary constraints that they're working on also. And keeping in mind that you're placing additional burdens on them. They're trying to do the best they can, and now you want them to be going and doing additional professional education. They've got teacher contracts they're working under that they can only expect so much additional professional education, and you need to work within the constraints and make sure that to build that connection with them, make sure they understand that you're hearing them, that they have these constraints, and that you're willing to be flexible about these things to try and build that relationship with them. And keeping in mind that you as a parent are walking in there and you are telling them something different than the college professor that they had educate them to be a professional, and you're trying to say to them that the way that they were trained to be a teacher is wrong. That's a really big ask to ask of these professional educators, that I as the parent know better than this professor that taught you how to teach. I mean, that's a gap that you need to acknowledge and that you need to try and work through and everything. When I went to this meeting, I was very taken back by how smart and educated the people were that I was sitting across the table from. It became obvious quickly that I was talking to people with doctorates and masters in education that had been doing this for 20-some years, and that here I was coming in and I'd been interested in dyslexia for a year and a half. And that's a big deal, and it's something that you should be aware of before you go into that meeting for the first time. Doing your prior research during that research phase we talked about goes a long way to trying to overcome those issues. And part of that is making sure that you're ready for all the acronyms that they're going to be throwing at you. There were a lot of parents that hadn't gone as deep into the research as me that were at that first meeting, and they felt completely lost, and I had to explain to them after we got out of the meeting what it was that these people were saying, because the acronyms came so fast and quickly that they didn't understand. At a minimum, you should make sure that you know what SLD is, IEP, 504, and all these acronyms that I've got there. There's probably some additional ones that would be helpful too, but they're going to be using them, and you need to learn how to speak their language before you go into that meeting. The big thing also I found from that is avoiding the temptation to be the dyslexia expert, and that's true whether you have a degree in special education or not, is that you need to understand what your role is when you go into those meetings, because if you're pushing for one specific thing, that's going to be a real challenge for you to overcome all of this years of experience that's out there and tell them that they are doing things wrong and you've got the right way to do it and they need to come around to your way of thinking on it. So if that's not your job, is to be the expert and to tell them how they should be doing dyslexia interventions better, what roles can you be? The first thing you can be is a parent. You can make those individual stories and connections and say what it is that your child is going through and make those emotional connections with them. You can be an advocate. So an advocate is the squeaky wheel, the person who makes sure with all the competing interests that they've got that you're one of the people that's in their office and keeping that ideas at the top of their pile of issues that they're working on. You can hold them accountable as an advocate. We've met with you for 2 years now. We had specific things that we were asking for, and none of them have been accomplished. That's the kind of thing where you pay attention to it. We've asked for some specific questions, and you've never given us responses back on these specific things. And coming back and summarizing with them what you feel has been achieved is important too. And the last thing is you can be a connection to the dyslexia community. All the stuff that gets posted for professional development opportunities, I pass those on, and they thank me for making them aware at the district level. They distribute that information down to the teachers. The teachers have a lot of choices about where they're going to spend their professional development, continuing education. Make sure that this is one of the things that they're considering when they're deciding what classes they're going to be going to for that year. So someone needs to be making some specific recommendations for how it is that they're going to be getting better outcomes for dyslexia. If that's not going to be you as one of the parents, who is that person going to be? Well, you met her today. So Amy Schulte and Vicky Weinberg, we had really, really good results when one of the first things that we pushed for Lakeville to do was to go meet with those two people. It sounds like they're getting a lot of those requests now, and they're starting to group some of them together, but our district administrators came back charged up, excited with lots of good ideas. They're working with other people who are sanctioned by the state of Minnesota, which is good in building credibility. They're people who have the same degrees and speak the same lingo that they do. I just think that here's an opportunity where you have two people who are on your side. They want the same things that you do. They study it deeply. Use those resources and get your districts. If you can accomplish one thing, get your district leaders to meet with these people and then summarize for you as a parent group, what did you come away from with that? Are there any action items or things that you're going to do different based off of the meeting you had? It's not enough that they just meet with them. Tell them beforehand, we want to see if there's anything new that you learned or things that you're going to do different based off of these conversations, and try and hold them accountable to that also. Because you've got some real good resources inside the state of Minnesota now because of some of the legislation that's been passed. I want to talk real quick about the benefits of written communication. That's my preferred way to communicate. I don't consider myself a great public speaker, but I love writing big, long documents like that. So I think that the benefits of that is it gives time for the staff to process the information that you're giving them before you get into the meeting. We had won what we were trying to accomplish before we ever sat down with our district administrators for the first time. Like I said before, the first thing out of their mouth was, we hear what you're saying, we like what you're saying, we want to partner with you, we don't want to have an adversarial relationship with you. That was before we said anything in that meeting, because we had given them some documents with very specific things that we were trying to accomplish on it, and given our position paper about how we saw this issue, and we'd come to an agreement before we even had to open our mouths there. It gives you an opportunity to create a written record of possible legal violations. That's a big deal. That gets administrators' attention. If they are outside of compliance with the law, if you've written it down and then if they do nothing about it, that's the kind of thing that, you know, gets people's attention. It helps with unifying that message from the group so that you don't have a lot of different things that are coming in, you know, on the fly when you're meeting with them, and helping them stay on point. And it also gives something to refer back to. If it's been 2 years and you made some requests for information and they still haven't replied to that, you've got this documentation that says, you know, they're really not even engaging with us as a group. That's the kind of thing that you can go to school boards with and have a written document. Oral communication, the best thing for doing that is not to try and advocate specific things that you want to accomplish. The oral communication is really to share the experience that you have, to make that connection with those district administrators, influence the way that they look at the issue and share perspective. Don't try to accomplish certain, you know, specific things as part of that. That's what the written is for. The oral communication is for them to provide feedback to you on what it is that they're doing and to try and build that partnership and that connection with those people. This is actually my last thing. Arguments that I have found have been most effective that the administrators are listening to. Legal compliance. The legal compliance stuff isn't going to get a kid reading, but it is going to start getting you in that habit of you make requests and then they take action on it, and it starts to build up that relationship of taking you seriously. Equity is a huge one. Minnesota, one of the biggest issues that you're going to see in the newspaper all the time is the issue of educational equity and how lower income students and minority students are not performing the way that their peers are. My family is part of that problem because we take our kids and we get the help that they need by paying with our own private funds and by having, you know, parents who can stay at home and work with them on these things. And there are kids whose parents aren't aware of these issues and couldn't pay for it if they could, who are stuck in the school system still. And dyslexia is one of the contributing factors to equity within our school systems. And that's something that the district administrators really care about and that you can use to draw action out of them. Standardized testing. If a kid can't read, they're going to be a drain on that school's standardized tests throughout the entire 13 years that they're in that school district. They can't learn math, they can't learn science, they can't learn these other subjects if they can't read. If they can make interventions at those lower grade levels, that 1st through 3rd grade, read well by 3rd grade, that's going to have an impact on the district's test scores throughout the entire time that they're a student that's there. Comparison to peer districts. You know, take information about what St. Cloud is doing, what Minnetonka is doing, what Lakeville and the other districts that are having success in these areas, and say, is this anything that you would consider? They don't want to be the last one to the party of dyslexia and be behind everyone else. And the last thing is, I think, emphasizing that this is an issue that has bipartisan political support at the legislature. The rate at which we've been making legislative changes and how this is an issue that affects both sides of the aisles and has people coming in, let schools know that this is not just a temporary thing, that this is a movement that is going to continue having additional requirements that come to the district, and the earlier that they get on top of this, the better off they're going to be. One thing I forgot to mention here also is that there is a funding issue. It is incredibly cost prohibitive to have lots of parents who are putting their kids in for requests for IEPs. And if we've got so many kids that have dyslexia within the school districts and they're requesting IEPs, that is not the best way to meet the needs of all of these students. And so if parents feel like they're being heard and their kid is getting the help that they need to, and they're getting positive results out of the school district without pursuing IEPs and without special education plans, they're not going to have a need to go to those additional measures. I'm a strong believer that any kid who qualifies for special education should have access to that, But by rephrasing this with the school districts and letting them know we want to find the most cost-effective way to deal with dyslexia in the district. We're not pushing all of our parents towards IEPs. We want to find ways to be able to handle these needs, within the core education classroom or within pull-out, whatever the least restrictive way is to get these needs met. If you get ahead of the issue, it's going to help all the funding issues that go along with the higher levels of support that the kids need.